Okay. And are we rolling yet, Jose?
Yeah, we are recording.
Wonderful. Let's begin. I think everyone who, the only doubtful person is John Carter, whether he'll still be able to come, but otherwise I think we're ready to go. So we'll consider the roll call called. Could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda, draft agenda?
I will move we adopt the agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Lynn.
I second.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of our January 6th meeting?
Which of the documents, John, could you just clarify which of the documents you sent out that are the minutes? Because you also had notes, which seem to be different from minutes, and just.
So yes, so I sent all this out ahead of the January the 11th meeting of the full task force, since it was information for them. So I included in that mailing as one long document the minutes, the annotated set of principles that we approved, Jennifer's outline, and one other document that eludes me right now. But for emailing convenience, I put it all in one document. But the minutes are only a page and a half or so. So I think I resent it all. In fact, I think I sent it twice yesterday. So the minutes are only a page and a half. But they attach the text of the principles that we approved at the end of our January 6th meeting, with the note included, the note that we all agreed on, the interpretive note of the principles. And I also
motion that we approve the minutes.
I'm looking for a motion to approve if folks are ready to do that.
I think I just made a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Gary.
Second.
Is that Burton?
David.
David. Okay, thank you, David. Any opposed?
I abstain.
That's Bill Penniman?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So right now we're on item 4 of our agenda, and let me explain what item 4 is all about. Well, no, item 4 is clear. This is editing and approval of the draft revised transportation connectivity, missing word is principles. Pardon me for that. In the light of the full task force discussion. Now, again, the task force considered the principles that we had approved at the end of our January 6th meeting. And I've attached the best notes that I had been able to take during the meeting, which I was busy trying to moderate the meeting and take notes, so I do not vouch for their completeness. And Jose, I could not find, perhaps I'm just not skilled enough, but I could not find the YouTube video, so I couldn't check the video. Is it not posted for the January the 11th full task force meeting?
Yeah, it's on the supervisor's YouTube channel. I can send you the playlist. It's easier to find the whole collection, including the working group
Okay.
videos.
Okay.
Probably easier for you.
Okay. Yeah, I tried a couple times, but I just couldn't found many meetings, but not the 11th. But again, I'm not the most technical guy. So
Jose, could you send it to me as well?
I beg your pardon?
Could Jose send it to me as well?
Yeah, happy to send it to everybody.
Oh, great.
Okay. So we can either do this tonight, or we can wait until everyone's had a chance to look at the video from the 11th to confirm what the comments were and then decide what we want to do with the comments. So I guess my tendency, well, let me ask this. Does anybody want to discuss the principles in the light of the discussion we had in the full task force on the 11th? You do, Jan. Okay. Well, let's have a brief discussion then. So, Jan, why don't you indicate, again, we had come after a vigorous but very friendly discussion on the 6th. We had come to a carefully framed agreement on the principles with explanatory notes. And you heard the comments on the 11th. So Jan, what further would you want to say? I can't, Jan, I think you're muted.
I think so too. Okay. Just that I agree that prismatic should not be in the principles, but I don't see it. And
I'm sorry.
second paragraph, okay. There you go. And basically, I think that everybody likes the second part of the sentence about parking. So that's majority. That was also the task force that liked that. So I think we need to leave that in.
Thank you.
I may not agree, but we need to leave that in because the majority rules. Let's see any other comments. I agree. Don't use a grid of streets. I didn't know Bob Simon was strongly opposed to that, but that was interesting. Yeah. Principles reflect a modal bias against cars. I like that comment. There's already a pro-car modal bias in Reston. And that was interesting. Walter Alcorn said more than 70% of Northern Virginia Transportation Authority's funding already goes to roads and improvement. So that's food for thought. Let's see. I think that if the metro were a little more reliable, it could prove to be very, very handy, but at this point, it's not always reliable as they close stations and open them up again. So I guess those are my 2 cents on it, my comments anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Jan.
John, just one thing on your summary of your notes concerning the last larger meeting. You have me down as we shouldn't overstress modal neutrality. I actually said I am opposed to the concept of modal neutrality since I think it is critical that we get to a less vehicle dependent system. And okay. I've been consistent on that.
Okay.
It's not changing anything inside the traditional PRC areas, but we don't want as many cars in the TSAs.
Okay,
That makes sense.
I will make
and
that.
Part of the problem is that, you get a phrase like that and nobody really knows what it means or how it'd be applied. And I just don't want anybody to say, oh gosh, I agreed to a lot of cars in the TSAs.
Okay, so you want to be noted as opposing the notion of modal neutrality, correct? Bill?
Yes, that's what I said in our last transportation committee and larger meeting.
Okay,
Again, I don't know what the term means, but I can see how it could be misused to say we should have as many cars everywhere, and that's not the point of a TSA.
okay.
And it's also contrary to county policies.
I don't
Okay.
see where you see that.
So basically, Jan, he's referring to my the attachment to one of the documents I sent as an attachment called written and oral comments on the January 6th draft of the principles, comments made at the January 11th full task force meeting.
That's what I'm looking at.
Right, and in that I quoted, I tried to quote Bill Penniman in the, so there are 3 layers of bullets. So the second main bullet, general comments, had its last section was modal bias, and the last sub bullet under modal bias purported to be a quote from Bill Penniman. We shouldn't overstress modal neutrality, and he wants to flat out say he opposes modal neutrality. So he's correcting my account of what he said.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Bill.
And John, this is David again. If I may, I'd like to pile on with Mr. Penniman and say that we cannot ignore the fact that we have to reduce traffic. We have to reduce vehicular traffic, and I would like to find a way to get away from the term modal bias. I'm going to probably throw a term out that I've used before that is equally as amorphous, but I think what we ought to be trying to do is develop modal balance. And that doesn't mean equal portions of all the different ways you can get downtown, but talking about modal bias, I think perpetuates the problems that we are facing.
Thank you.
John,
yes.
this is Burton. I was inspired by your comments during our last working group meeting to try to participate in 2 meetings at the same time. So I'm doing that tonight. But I wanted to say that I also agree with Bill Penniman's point that we shouldn't actually be trying for modal neutrality. And also note that the county has already set goals to increase the modal share of bicycling. So, the county is on record as having, as having a goal of trying to increase the modal share of a certain mode of transportation. So that's not modal neutrality right there. That's like, I think, using urban planning to accomplish social objectives and solve problems by making decisions that actually are intended to influence people's behaviors.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Bill?
Can I jump in, Jennifer?
Yes, Jennifer.
I think that we're getting into a discussion about people's opinions, which is great. But I think what we're trying to do is decide if we need to make any wording updates to the principles based on what we heard from the full task force.
That is
So,
the purpose. Yeah.
one that I would throw out is that both this group and the full task force commented on the word prismatic and the potential of taking that out, because it's not fully understandable to everyone. And I don't feel like I heard any objections truly in either group. And that could be something we can make an edit on the principles on.
Okay, thank you. I think we all sense, however, what the principal author of the document, Scott Leary, meant by prismatic, namely saying that these principles will apply to different times and different locations in different ways. So we understand the meaning that was intended by prismatic, whether that successfully bore that load.
But John, I think we agreed to take prismatic out. And I think a whole lot of people were in agreement with that, is what I heard at the, major meeting, and Jennifer's pointing that out.
I think,
And she, excuse me, and she just pointing out that was the thing we kind of agreed to. And the last, I could talk all day here in opposition to what Bill Penman said and Burton. We could be here for a long time discussing that. I think that was direct opposite of what's good for Reston. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Hope we don't get into that.
Okay. So
thanks to Jennifer for getting us back on track. I think the right thing to do is take out prismatic. Mark Malcolm was the one who suggested that we add that, but John, I think you got the reason that he wanted to add it, and I think that the text is fine without it and still accomplishes what he was trying to do by adding that word. He's not here that I see, but
I think it was
I think
actually
we should take it out.
Okay. No, I hear that. I do think Scott was the original author, but Mark did defend the term. But I was not defending retaining prismatic, but what I was doing was trying to recognize the intent of that word, which was to say that these are not iron rules that are applied the same everywhere at every time, but rather need to be applied prudentially to each situation and each time. And I think that's what prismatic, that was the function of the word. I agree we need to get a better word.
Yes.
An easier word. So here's
John, I'll just add to what Burton said. I think it reads fine without the word. And I don't think we need to spin to go looking for something else, is my own take. I don't know what Burton and others think, but.
Okay.
I agree. I think it reads fine as it is, and we've already discussed this at our last meeting.
I agree.
Okay. Good enough. Now, here's what I would like to do. I don't think, we worked very hard on the 6th to come up with this. I think a few tweaks may be necessary. One of the things that I know John Carter strongly suggested that we remove the reference to the grid of streets. I'm wondering if, and there was general support for that. What I'm wondering is whether we lose anything if we get rid of it and simply deal with it in the body of the document. What are people's thoughts on that?
Where exactly are you referring to, John?
So this is the last bullet, the 6th bullet in the principles themselves. Where it says,
John, did John Carter explain his thinking?
Yeah, I think
behind that recommendation.
There was a replacement word that someone came up with. Does anyone?
That's what I remember.
Was it network?
Yeah, it's transportation network, I think.
Transportation network, yeah.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I would agree too.
That was John.
So let me comment on that, and that is, the concept in the TSAs, it's not elsewhere. There's a network of streets is what you have for the whole area. And that's fine. No disagreement there. Within the TSAs, though, the grid of streets concept was very central to planning of those areas. And so to the extent it's not included here, I'm not sure if that matters that much. But to the extent anybody thinks we're doing away with the concept, you're completely disrupting the planning that's gone on for the TSAs and for the town center, including the new areas being developed there. I mean, it's a critical concept for getting people off the main roads and in other ways of getting through these newly developing areas. So I think it goes away. I'm not sure the point of taking it out, but
let's let Bill finish, and then I think Gary, you were next. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no, I just think it's a critical part of what's developing. I mean, and it's both in the Wheelie area and in the town center. Yes, so it can't go away whether you say it here or not.
Okay, thank you. Gary, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say to Bill, I thought what we talked about was just an alternative term for that. I mean, maybe I'm forgetting the last time, meeting and what was said, but I kind of recall that it was just more of a clarification, but I may be, not remembering it. But I thought, Jennifer, did you remember the same thing? Or?
Yes,
So-
I think that it's the same concept. It's just a word clarification change.
Right. That's what I thought it was, Bill.
Okay, so to the extent the phrasing is changed as I see this red suggestion, future transportation network incorporate concepts and amenities that make these spaces where people want to live, work, and play.
I think that's fine.
Well, we're not changing the network for roads, at least. Maybe depending on how you're viewing it, but it's primarily something where those new amenities are going to be. But
Right. And that's why I raised the question whether or not we actually want to remove that last bullet, because to me, the main point was that whether we call it a street network or a grid of streets, we wanted to say that these are not just roadways, but they are to help create spaces where people live, work, and play. So it's a place-making emphasis.
right, which is why you shouldn't take out the bullet. You might want to change it to say the word network. That's fine. I don't really care about that. But I just think understand that development of a new set of streets inside the TSAs is an important component of making them work and reducing traffic burdens on the rest of Reston.
If I could just add a clarifying statement.
Yes.
I don't think that the grid of streets is limited to just the TSA. We see that the grid of streets has grown beyond the TSA into the PRC. So, I mean, I'm in favor of this transportation network verbiage.
Okay, good enough. Thank you, Lynn. So,
Thank you, John.
so I hear a mounting consensus that we in fact retain that last bullet, but change grids to networks and see it primarily as a place-making intent. We're not just building streets, we're building streets in a way that also create places.
And I think transportation network is not just limited to streets. It's opening it up to other forms, whether it's pathways.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
may I weigh in here?
please.
I understand the concern about the term grids of streets, but that is the current terminology in transportation planning.
Okay.
That is the state of the practice, using the concept of grids of streets, and it incorporates your bikes, your scooters, your pedestrians, and also uses of those roadways. So from a transportation planning perspective, grids of streets is the most accurate, and as of today, the most current terminology.
Thank you, Scott.
Also, one of the things, if I can double back very quickly, if in the second, well, the introductory sentence that is not really a paragraph, rather than prismatic, if you guys could incorporate the word contextual or within context, that would probably make that sentence perfect. I'll leave it to you folks to figure out where it goes. But here in Florida, we actually, God, I hate to say that I'm here in Florida, but here in Florida, we actually have a context classification, and it runs from urban to absolute rural, and everything we do is looked at from that context classification. What the requirements are varies from that, and that would work within Reston because you have an urbanized town center TSA area out to the suburban areas, such as the upper reaches of Wheelie and the lower reaches of on Fox Mill. So you really do have all the contexts in a smaller area, but the word context may be the way to go there. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that's a decent suggestion, and one that, the work group recommends these principles as contextual guidelines or something like that would be a good place to put it. You could put it other places, but I think contextual is something that people will understand better than I thought prismatic.
I agree.
Okay. So general agreement on that. Scott, I would like to point out to you on the notion of grid and streets, whatever the current term of art among transportation planners is, in Reston, grid of streets has two meanings that make it not fit well. The first is that the term grid of streets in the current comprehensive plan is used specifically in the TSAs only, not in the rest of Reston. Secondly, grid suggests a geometrical regularity in streets, and that is something that Bob Simon, as was pointed out on the 11th, did not like that term. John Farrell pointed that out, and in fact, we do not that perfect geometrical regularity is avoided outside the TSAs. So that is a limitation of the term grid of streets in Reston's context that cautions us, I think, to avoid it.
And that's fair given the history. I will also state that grid of streets does not apply to a series of boxes like Center City, Philadelphia, or a city such as that. But then might I suggest that in addition to transportation network, you actually include the word placemaking?
I like that because I think we'll agree that placemaking is at the heart of what this bullet is trying to get at. Don't you all?
Yes, and I think that the way to do it would be, future transport. I think Scott's made the point that grid versus transportation network, although as long as we have common understandings, that's fine with transportation network. But future transportation network incorporate placemaking concepts and amenities that make these spaces. So you can, in between the word incorporate and concepts, put the word placemaking, and I think that's a helpful addition. And thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah.
This is Burton, and I agree with those comments from Bill Penniman. I think something that is lost when you take out grid of streets and just replace it with transportation network is if you have a grid of streets, whether it's like actual squares or just interlocking streets, is when you hit some traffic, you can make a turn and go around it. And there's more than one way to get to your destination. And that's what I think is lost if you just take out grid of streets and just plug in transportation network, because a transportation network can be a hub and spoke sort of situation, a cul-de-sac heavy situation. So but I'm comfortable with removing grid of streets since placemaking goes in. I think that gets the same idea. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So here's, I don't want to either cut off conversation or drag it out long, but I'm going to make a suggestion. We've heard, and many of us have taken notes on what we've said on the improvements to the principles. I would like to have a couple people, and I would hope, Scott, you would be part of it. I hope others of you who've joined in would work with me to try to come up with a redraft with a few key changes, but I emphasize few, so that we can get this into a form that takes into account all the observations made in our group and the full task force. So
John, why do we need to do that? If we add contextual, we replace transportation network with grid of streets and add placemaking, I think we don't need to go back and redo this again.
Okay.
I agree.
Can I make a suggestion? And that is, I'm happy either way. Let me just say that. I noted my disagreement with modal neutrality concepts, and if you want to make that change, I'd love it. But let's view this as not set in concrete, but we have a lot of other things to discuss before we let's go through that and then come back to this, because there may be other revisions, and just not view this as provisional, something necessarily written for all time.
Okay, I mean that's acceptable. So what I could do is, if you would trust me to note the changes in the minutes, this will again appear as an attachment to today's minutes, indicating these changes. There are also a few. There is not a grammatical parallelism among the six principles. So I would like to change that lack of grammatical parallelism, subject, verb, object type stuff. So I will do that, and then we will not force ourselves to finalize it overly soon, but we will consider it. I like the term provisional final draft or something like that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good enough.
Okay, John, I will send you the working document with the notes.
Thank you very much, dear scribe.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
when
ma'am.
are we planning on having this completed?
Actually, the first week of April. So if you look at
Thank you.
I set out a work plan and tentative work plan and timetable, and we are thus far on track to finish this in early April.
John, can I make one observation? This is Tammy Petrine.
Yes, Tammy.
We are half or a portion TSA and a portion PRC. Please, task force subgroup, when you are making these suggestions for that are going to go into the comprehensive plan for Reston, please understand that in a PRC, what you are providing is more than a vision. A PRC comprehensive plan it's not quite ordinance, but it's close. So when you are putting down, picking words and whatnot, if the county wants to do something and you have it in your plan, they can do it and say, oh, this conforms to the comprehensive plan. You have to be extremely careful. Burton made the comment, well, you know, the county wants bicycles. Dude, the county also wants ZMOD passed, and ZMOD has a whole bunch of bad stuff in it. So because the county, whatever amorphous thing that is, wants something, doesn't mean it's good for Reston. Yeah, the county would love to densify Reston to a fare thee well. That is not necessarily in our best interest. And I'll leave that to each individual to figure it out. But pay attention to what you're writing down here, that it can be used as an excuse when a plan comes forward. Yes, this does match the comprehensive plan. Therefore, no sweat. We're gonna move on this and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for that important reminder about the unique legal linkage between comprehensive plan and PRC districts in the zoning ordinance. A unique linkage, a unique legal linkage. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay. So with the help of our dear scribe Jennifer, I will include in the minutes for this meeting a revised version of the principles, which we'll call a provisional final, with the amendments we've agreed on tonight. Okay. Thank you all. So somebody said, I guess it was Lynn who asked, when are we going to finish? And we actually have a specific date using the known calendars, or insofar as they are known, for both the task force and us. And we actually have the date of April the 5th. But anyway, early April is what we're aiming for. So the goal in early April is to actually have a final text for the transportation section of the 2021 comprehensive plan. That is our final deliverable. And so that is why, so I want to look at our goal, our ultimate goal. So that's why under 5, I say we're preparing for agenda item 6, where we talk about our list of issues, and with an eye to use that list of issues to get to the final text. What I'd like to do is to discuss our initial preferences. These do not have to be final, but our initial preferences for organizing, how we're going to organize that final text. Okay, because how we want to organize the final text will suggest how we organize the intermediate steps to that. Okay, so I sent you a number of documents. So A says, do we want a combined or separate treatment of the TSAs and non-TSA areas concerning transportation connectivity issues? So if you look at the document I sent, it's called Initial Alternative Layouts for the Transportation Connectivity sections of the 2021 Reston Comp Plan. You'll see it has 3 columns. Do you all see that document? So the leftmost column is how the current 2013-2014 comp plan is organized. There are 2 different sections separated by scores of pages in between them. One about transportation issues community-wide, and the other transportation in the transit station areas. And those are its those are their subheadings. The middle column is what John Carter proposed to me as I was discussing with him a week and a half ago. He was suggesting that we have community-wide introduction, vision, and principles, and we've been working on those principles. And then you've heard John say there are really only 4 issues in transportation comprehensive planning for transportation. One is the facilities themselves, secondly, transit, third, transportation management, and placemaking. And what he suggested is that we have one combined presentation grouped under those 4 headings, but under each of the headings, we would have specific applications to non-TSA areas, and then applications to the TSA areas. Another alternative that I discussed with John that he did not like so much was, again, we would have community-wise vision and principles, and then it would be the major divisions would be between non-TSA areas and TSA areas. So reversing the subordination of those levels of analysis. So do you all have an inclination? First of all, is the issue clear to you what we're trying to talk about? How we want our final text to be organized? And that will lead us to make sure that our intervening steps are leading toward that kind of organization of the final text. Does that make sense?
John Mooney, John Carter is now on.
Hi, John Carter. Defend yourself against my representation of you. John Carter.
I'm not sure he was on when you were going through your 3 examples.
I need to unmute. I've been on actually for a while.
Oh, good.
So do you want to hear from me? Is that?
Yes.
You know, one thing to keep in mind is we need to do it, whatever it is, before we can always make changes along the way. The reason why I like it combined is for some of give it an example would be the bikeways. And if you look at the text the way it is now, it's repeated. You have the same bikeway recommendation in the transit areas, and the same, almost word for word, and the same graphic in the non-transit areas. That's not necessary. Other areas might be different. Say that when you get to transportation management, we probably will have different standards for the intersections in the transit areas than we do in the non-transit areas. But I think you can handle that within the major topics, which is facilities, transit, management, and placemaking. So that's why I favor that middle road, at least to start. If we have a problem, then okay, we'll address it. But I think we can do it. And combining it, as you see the way the text is organized now, the 2 transportation sections aren't even together. They're in different parts of the master plan, the comp plan. That to me doesn't make sense, and it makes it hard to follow and even harder to enforce. So anyway, those are my points.
And another reason I like John's middle column suggestion is not only does it avoid repetition, but it emphasizes the real mutual impact of the 2 areas on each other.
Yes.
And allows us, therefore, to talk about how to integrate and coordinate the 2.
I don't have a strong opinion on this one. One can write documents any number of different ways. What I like about the first column and John's idea of combining the different transportation sections in one place, but still having a distinction, there are two reasons. One is having a broad conception of how the two interact is fine and certainly ought to be there. But we aren't talking about many transportation changes in the PRCs that I'm aware of. But the focus going forward for the planners and the zoners is on the TSA. So having a coherent description of what's going on in the TSAs and how it fits into placemaking and all of that, I think makes planning sense. There is one advantage to proceeding that way. It's easier. There's less to rewrite. One can work from what's there and improve it, but starting from scratch is just one extra barrier to getting done by early April.
Okay, so you prefer column 1, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, as a general matter, but it to the extent John is right that there isn't adequate integration of the something is wrong with the transportation community wide. I mean, I think that's the broad statement of broad principles about mobility and the like. But where the action is going to be for actual zone planning, it's going to be in the TSA still. So keeping that in one place with placemaking clearly connected, to me, makes it easier. But like I say, you can write it lots of different ways.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Other viewpoints?
John, this is Mark Looney.
Yes.
I harbor no illusions that people will be sympathetic to this viewpoint, but as to Bill Penniman's point, for those of us who have to look to implement the comprehensive plan, if we have to toggle back and forth between 4 different sections of the plan in order to find what's applicable in the TSA for each of the 4 different topic areas, it makes it harder to make sure that you cover all of those requirements as opposed to sort of segregating out what's expected in the TSA areas versus the non-TSA areas. Because I think to Bill's point, the majority of the zoning activity on a go-forward basis is inside the TSAs as opposed to outside. And so for that reason, I lean more toward alternative 2 on the plan or some version thereof versus the esteemed Mr. Carter's vision. But
so
I get paid no matter what, so you guys choose.
So Mark, you like column 3, is that right?
Yeah, or some variation of it. That's sort of
number 3. Okay.
Yeah, so some variation of it that aggregates, if you will. Here are the 10 things expected of you if you're looking to develop in the TSAs, right? And you could set your vision for how the areas are to be integrated together at the outset, because I think John is correct that right now it's a bit of a mess where you have different sections on different transportation that, you've got an area-wide, Reston-wide section on transportation, and then you've got a TSA section on transportation that in many respects repeat one another. And I agree wholeheartedly at trying to streamline some of the repetitiveness where appropriate, but there are things in the TSAs that are just simply different and inappropriate, quite frankly, for the non-TSA areas. And so just trying to put all of the TSA expectations that into one area makes it easier to make sure that you're addressing it appropriately and not losing something because you're forced to toggle back and forth.
Thank you, Mark.
John, this is
John,
Jennifer.
this is Burton.
Yes, Burton.
I move that we proceed with the middle column approach, and then when we've gotten a fair way into that, consider Mark Mooney's comments that he just made and reconsider that approach and any other problems that we might encounter.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would second that. Scary.
Yeah, we can have discussion.
Discussion.
Discussion. I prefer the third one because you don't have like facilities done and TIA. You're doing non-TSA areas. There it is. And they're doing TSA areas. And then you can compare the two, that they're quite different. I would put TSA areas first and the non-TSA areas second if you want to get into the transit and the buses and the bikes and that sort of thing, and then handle the non-TSA area. I like the idea of having the different things down. It just seems to me it's easier to see than going to facilities, non and TSA, and then going to the check. It's just easier to see one area with the stuff listed in the other area, and your mind goes to the other area, and there you have those other ones. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jan. Other comments, other discussion before we take a vote.
This is Bill one more time, and that is Mark and Jan persuaded me. I now prefer the last column to the first one. I frankly hadn't even looked closely at the last one. But I think it's just easier for everybody to comprehend and to work through.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Jennifer.
Jennifer.
This is Jennifer. I have 2 points. One is I've stood before John and the board and tried to make comments, and to make comments between a non-TSA and a TSA area is very difficult, because at the end of the day, the commission and the board of supervisors are looking at Reston's comprehensive plan. And I think that really should be a theme, and part of the reason why I want it to be on the overall task force in general is because we're at the point now where we need to be looking at one Reston, how things blend together. We've had a lot of developments that have already come before the board of supervisors and the planning commission, and where we continue to fail is how we make these things blend together. And an example I will give you is when we were working on Campus Commons last October. That is in the TSA area, but literally right across the street is the PRC. And giving some direction on how we're blending these communities together is a really important concept, I think, in this version of the comprehensive plan.
And that leads you to support which version, Jennifer?
The second one. So when we talk about facilities, I see a non-TSA TSA, but as column 1, there's going to be things that are community wide. And I think that that's an important concept to get into this plan. Is we might have a community wide under facilities, and then we might have a couple bullet points that are different between the two. But we need to start trying to get to a community wide transition plan.
Thank you. Other comments? Other discussion?
Jennifer, would your concern be addressed in column 3 if we make clear that that first point, community-wide vision and principles, is a lengthy discussion that shows the big picture, and then the other one shows where the differences are?
When you're working with staff, develop the staff that are looking at this, and just like Mark Looney said, they're going to flip to the section that says, this is my development area, and they're going to look at that section. They're not going to look at the other section. And that's why the second column really makes people reflect on what are we trying to do in Reston, and what's the nuances between the two. If you form it in something where it's either community-wide, like column 1, community-wide and just TSA areas, if someone is developing something in TSA, they're not going to look at community-wide. Or in the last column, if they're in the TSA area, they're going to look at facilities. They're not going to look at the non-TSA area facilities section. And I really think in this plan, we need to be looking at both, because that blending is what's important.
I agree with that. This is Lynn.
I'm sorry, Lynn, you agree with whom?
I agree
Lynn, you
with Jennifer's. Yeah, I agree with Jennifer's observation that she just shared with the group.
Yeah, Jennifer, for what it's worth, this is Mark. I'm not disagreeing with you that better blending them together is preferred, right? Right now, I'm going to make the number up, but let's say that the transportation sections for Reston wide and the TSA areas are separated in the comprehensive plan by 40 pages. I agree that they ought to come under one under one headline or under one nomenclature. All I'm suggesting is that when you get down into the weeds of what the comprehensive plan actually talks about, I'll give you an example, right? The conversation about what Wheelie Avenue ought to look like in terms of placemaking is going to be different in the TSA than it is outside of the TSA. And that trying to figure out where my placemaking requirements are, it's easier and more understandable, and there's a bright line that can be drawn between the TSA and the non-TSA areas. For, just as an example, right? If you have, there's been a large conversation in Reston over the last 65 years about streetlights. And there's an expectation in the TSAs that you will have streetlights. You don't have the same expectation outside of the TSA areas. And you want to draw, pardon the pun, a bright line between street lighting inside the TSAs and street lighting outside the TSAs. And that's why I think putting all of the transportation issues under one or in one section makes a tremendous amount of sense. But the actual details of what you do at what property or at what location is going to differ as between the TSAs and the non-TSAs. And you can talk in the area-wide conversation of this network has to function together. There are streets and bikeways and other things that start in the PRC areas and terminate or continue through the TSA areas. And that network ought to be continuous, but what you do with the network inside the TSAs versus outside the TSAs may be different for reasons that this group has already discussed. So that's why I like the organization of alternative 2, the third column, better than the others.
I'd just like to say that the non-TSA areas would love lighting. That's where we really need it. And we don't have it. It's the South Reston. It's so darn dark. And if we could have lighting here, it would be great. Thank you.
Wildlife appreciates it.
Yeah, but what happens is the blending doesn't get done. So or the blending becomes, something that John has to sit at the planning commission and decide what should happen on, for instance, again with Campus Commons, I'm in a not TSA area, but yet a light had to be included because a building was going up across the street in the TSA areas. So looking at it collectively is the only way that we're going to get one Reston. And maybe 2 or 3 plans down the road, we actually have a plan that doesn't say non-TSA and TSA. We have a one Reston plan. So I appreciate the difference right now between having to have a distinction between the two, but I think the goal at the end of the day is that we have a one Reston comprehensive plan.
I won't belabor the point. I'll say you do have a one Reston plan. You just have different parts of Reston. And that's your challenge, right? Is that when you run a $6.5 billion rail line through the middle of the community, literally through the middle of the community, it's going to change the character of what you have. And you've got to figure out how to massage the perimeters of it, right? In the Campus Commons example, the last task force drew a bright red line and said, we won't cross Sunrise Valley Drive with development. But we're going to put on the north side of Sunrise Valley Drive, we're going to put significant development. And we're not going to change anything on the south side of it. And so therefore you have to be able to manage that disparate condition, north versus south on Sunrise Valley Drive. It's not going to be the same, is my point.
Absolutely. And that's what I think we need to address in this version.
Okay. Any other new parties to the discussion?
Do you want to put it to a vote?
Well, we could do that, or we could hold the vote. So as I count, I've heard 3 people, Mark and Jan and Bill Penniman, speaking for alternative 2. No one wants number 1. But yeah, ever since Bill Penniman switched number alternative, the 3rd column, there are no supporters for the 1st column, the current version. So we all want an integrated transportation section. That's clear. And then, so we have at least 3 people expressing support for the 3rd column. We have certainly Burton and Gary and Jennifer speaking for the middle column, John Carter.
And Lynn.
So
What?
we could vote.
John?
We could vote, but we could also do this. We could get into, if we get into the next item in the discussion and start working on what we call the deliverable number 3, which is a polished list of issues, which has not only topic headings, but more specific identification of the component issues, tries to get to root cause analysis of those issues, tries to develop options for overcoming or at least addressing those issues. It might be clearer to us how we want to do this, and we may come up with yet another version that affects the same integrating thing. I would hate to, my own view, because we've striven for consensus, is to, I think a vote would be premature. It would, I think, maybe lock us in and prevent for us from discovering a yet better way of doing it. But I think what's clear is everyone wants one unified transportation document. We don't want what currently is there. So we can vote. So if someone wants to call for the vote, fine. My own inclination at the time is not to do that.
So, John, let me just weigh in. I think your comments are sensible. In effect, the 2 columns, the last 2 columns, both have separate discussions of TSA, non-TSA areas, and it's almost a cut and paste issue as to how you move them around in the final version or partway through. I think to Jennifer's point about the problem of the seams, the space between and the interactions between, that's an important one that should be part of what I would call the community-wide vision and principles in either section. However you do it. This is address that interaction problem. But I think your point of let's start digging in. We're going to have separate discussions in some ways about TSA and non-TSAs and how we cut and paste the final version. We can defer without getting into right now. Thank you.
John Carter, I don't want to prolong this. I didn't mean to raise a big controversy over organization. That really wasn't my intent.
You didn't do it. I did.
Well, okay. I think for those, there isn't, when it comes to transportation, there isn't necessarily a bright line between the TSAs and the non-TSAs. Really, Avenue is an example. Where does Wheelie Avenue start and stop from a transportation perspective? It probably blends into the non-TSA areas, at least for a portion of it. But I think in general, we should get going. And I think the facilities section is probably the one that might be the most difficult to combine. But I think, I mean, if you want to do topics next time, that would be all right. But soon after, I would start writing the facilities chapter, which will tell you pretty quickly whether we can combine this in a reasonable way or not. So I'm with you, John. We probably should not vote at this point. But yes, I still harbor the notion of combining it together. And I guess it's column 2. So that's enough for me.
Okay. So I will ask the mover and the seconder whether they want to call the question. And to vote on their motion, so that would be Burton and Gary. Or are you willing to start working on the substance of the issues and then see? So we've all been made aware of possible final forms here.
John Mooney?
Yes, ma'am.
Burton is gone to another meeting, so let's just get on to the next subject.
Okay.
Burton has to step off to another meeting.
John, I will agree to what you just said. Since I guess I'm the seconder of Burton's motion and he's not here, I guess we should just go along with what you suggested, John.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. So in effect, you're withdrawing your second, or at least for now, temporarily
Yes.
withdrawing. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's go back now to tonight's agenda and look at number 6. Actually, let's stay with number 5. So 5B suggests that we include references going forward, trying to move toward our final product. We include references in John Carter's consolidated text of transportation sections of the current comprehensive plan. So you remember how we put together both parts into one document. So as we go forward, what I'm going to suggest is that in order to move toward that final text, we annotate John Carter's consolidated text of the 2013-14 comp plan transportation sections with the issues that we have identified. And that will show how we need to change the text, the parts of the text. Does that make any sense? So for example, if we talk about the grid of streets, which is whatever we talk about, if we make a correlation between the issues that Jennifer has been writing down for us and make a reference in the text, the consolidated text that John has done, it will show us what parts of the text we need to change. Okay, and at this point, and you may boo me out of here and hire a new chairperson, but I'm going to ask Jose to put on the screen that matrix. You may have seen the matrix that I devised. Can you put that up now, Jose?
I made Jennifer a presenter, but yeah, I'm happy to see if I can try to put it up if Jennifer can't find it.
One thing to keep in mind, John, is that when I took the main section on the TSAs and then the main section on the non-TSAs, there are other little tidbits scattered throughout the plan about transportation. So we don't want to forget those. That'll take some gleaning of the whole plan to put this together. That's another reason why I thought combining this would be much better.
Thank you, John, for that reminder alert. So
And
I would make a
John
note.
Mooney, I just want to clarify, what are you looking for? Are you looking for the document Jose has been keeping track of all of the issues of the task force?
So I'm going to shuttle between the document that you've been preparing, Jennifer. Okay. The list of issues. And this document here, this matrix that I did, it's really a form with only a few lines filled out. So,
Okay, the one in your email, got it.
yes. So let me, so basically, so we have our list of very telegraphical entries in the running list of issues that Jennifer has been scribing for us. Now, in order to use those to change the text of the plan, we need to fill that out a bit, okay? So what I attempted to do, if you could throw that matrix up, Jennifer. So, and as she's doing it, Jennifer and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and we decided we're going to change the outline formatting form. So instead of like Roman numeral 1, and the next step down is a capital A, and the next step down is the Arabic numeral 1, and the next step down is a small a, that kind of hierarchy, we're suggesting the hierarchy that goes, you have 4 points, it's section 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's subdivided into 1.1, and then 1.1 can be subdivided into 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and so forth. And the reason for doing that, it's easier to make a note in the consolidated text of the transportation sections that John Carter did. It's easier to make a note that way that, at a certain point in that text, we would say, see issue 1.1 or 2.2.3, whatever it is. It makes those references easier. And that will allow the persons doing trying to rewrite the text to look in the context of the existing text and see what parts of the text we need to change in the light of which issues that have been raised by this group. Does that make sense? So I tried to give an example. So
I think it makes sense. I think that it makes sense, John. I'm just wondering if we can do this offline.
we will
Just
do it.
present
We will
a final copy to the task force.
we will do it. We will do it offline.
Okay.
But we need this group's help. So if you look, can you put this?
Yes,
This document up?
I have both. Yep.
Okay, so, and we can shuttle between them if we had to, but basically I've faithfully copied down the first few entries. So 1.1, the transportation principles, 2, without any further subdivision are the questions, 3 specific questions that were raised, and then 2.1 are destinations around Reston. I have no idea what that means, so we need a longer title in my view. And then number 2.2 was balancing transportation modes. So going down, going from top to bottom, you list the issues, and going going horizontally, you have the outline address like 1.1. You have the current short title, and then we need a longer title that anyone, even who's unacquainted with the discussion, will be able to say, oh, I know what that means. And then specific issues, possible root causes of the issues, possible options for responding to those issues, and then ultimately our recommendation. Okay. Does that make sense?
John, I don't, I hate to be adding into this so much. I think this ought to align with the chapters. 2 ought to be facilities to me. And then you would ask all the questions about the specific issues. If you want to do the root cause and response options, I would do it that way. Otherwise, it's going to get confused and where things go. I'll give you an example of balancing transportation modes. That would be in the management section, I would think. Is that too much structure for this?
I'm trying. That's where I'm trying to go. That's where I'm trying to go.
Well, I would make two facilities, and then if you want to go through the table, then we could do that, and then get to the transit, and then get to the management, and then get the placemaking. I think it will flow better, and we can get from this issues to the actual writing the chapter quicker, I think. Sorry about that.
This is a group effort. This is a group effort. So
I agree. And I mean, we already have two as facilities, and we have all the issues under facilities.
Yeah, there's Bill. I don't know how many people have actually read the document that John compiled from the existing comp plan. And I don't know what are the missing pieces he just alluded to. But two things struck me because I have reread it, and two things struck me. One is most of what we're talking about is there. Maybe more needs to be said in about some areas, but it seems like a lot of the topics are addressed. But the other thing is that maybe it doesn't have to be. It looks like comprehensive plan is written in pretty broad terms and not in high detail. Perhaps that's wrong, but I'd be interested in John, Mark, whoever else wants to comment on what level of specificity are expected to put into comprehensive plan language.
Well, there's a tension there between the details that trip you up later versus the broadness being not detailed enough. So there's just a tension between those things. And the comp plan is supposed to be the vision. The zoning ordinance are the rules. And then the guidelines are the demonstration. So I don't know if there's a good answer, Bill, about the amount of detail, but I think the comp plan now is not too bad. I just think its repetitiveness and hard to find is the problem more than the details. Believe me, we get into the details a little bit, like the grid of streets, but being careful about too much detail is important. So I don't know. I'm not sure that's a very good answer, but there's just a tension there between master plan language, which tends to be higher level, versus detail, which tends to be the zoning ordinance. That's just life in creating comp plans. But again, the existing comp plan is not bad. It's the repetition and repeating and leaving things out is the problem that I have with it.
This is Mark. I'll weigh in just briefly to say that by legal standards, the comprehensive plan is supposed to be a guide to development. It's not supposed to act as an ordinance. And for whatever reason, going back decades, if not half centuries, Fairfax County's comprehensive plan has been very detailed in terms of very parcel specific plan guidance, that when you stack the comp plan volume on volume, it rises to the level of 4 or 5 feet in height on the paper versions. And few, if any, jurisdictions provide that level of detail on a parcel by parcel basis in their master plans. But for whatever reason, it's just the way it's developed in Fairfax County.
Well, part of the issue too is it's the way it's written has got repetition and so forth, and it makes it.
So just for
and so forth. So we have a chance to, make this written a lot better than in the past, which will help from a lot of perspectives. I think. Go to John's first comments.
I think we don't.
Reston is a different animal.
we don't really have to debate this, and maybe we should.
Right.
Yep. The task force is going to write this, and whatever we come up with is what we come up with, whether it's detailed or too high level, it'll be the task forces. So I think getting started would be the best thing to do.
Well, I would like to respond to two questions. One is level of detailed, and the second is how we go forward. So on the level of detail, I think responding, Mark, to your comments about the comprehensive plan as a guide, that is certainly part of the enabling ordinance, the Commonwealth's enabling ordinance, and it is certainly seen in many court cases in Virginia. However, we're dealing with a very unique phenomenon when we're talking about the PRC ordinance, because the PRC ordinance, indeed all of the planned development districts, but especially the PRC district, has a special legal tie to the comprehensive plan. So, you're acquainted with this, but I'll repeat it for other folks. In Article 16-101.1, it says a zoning application or a rezoning application or development plan application may be only approved for a plan development under the provisions of Article 6 if the plan development satisfies the following general standards. Number one, that the plan development shall substantially conform to the adopted comprehensive plan with respect to type, character, intensity of use, and public facilities. So because of that unique feature in the Fairfax County zoning ordinance, comprehensive plan has something more than mere guidance. It has a certain quasi-legal aura to it.
Right. I agree with you, John, and I think, again, not to belabor the point, if you go back to Bob Simon's original master plan, it was 3 pages. It was literally 3 maps. It was a land use plan, a transportation plan, and an infrastructure plan. And that was the guidance for the entire development of Reston, right? So we've now morphed into whatever it is, 150 pages worth of plan guidance for Reston in the last 60 years. And the question is, do we want to go to 260 or 360? Right? I mean, that's the conversation that we're having. So I agree with what you're saying. It's just that we've already morphed from 3 pages to 160. We're just trying to figure out whether we're going to go beyond that.
Right. And we need to find the sweet spot, as in everything. We need to find the sweet spot. Let me just quickly say my second thing. So, John, what I had proposed, John Carter, what I had proposed was trying to relate the more polished version of the issues to the text. And you are saying instead you would prefer to relate the issues to the 4 major headings. And and so that is a worthy conversation which will become clear as we proceed. However, what this matrix here, whichever way we go, whether relating the issues to the text, the existing text, or relating it to the 4 major issues, I think we have to come up with a more polished version of the issues, because right now all we have are a very telegraphic note of the issues. And I think we need, in my view, we need to become more specific on it, on the issues, following, in my view, something like the analysis laid out here in this matrix, where we already have an outline. So we have an address in the outline. We have a current short title, but the short title does not always interpret itself. So we need a slightly expanded one so that any reader can kind of understand the general issues. And then we need to list the specific issues that made us nominate this as an issue to start with, and then say, okay, what are the root causes of those issues? What might be options for responding to them, and then ultimately come up with a recommendation. That's how I see it. Does anyone else agree with that?
I think that I'd like to make a motion for the group to take the facilities section of the comprehensive plan, all of the sections, using John Carter's markups and the outline as an example, and start rolling up our sleeves and writing.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, discussion.
If we're going to start writing, what deadline are we working towards?
We're working toward the deadline. It's on our agenda today. We're working toward the deadline. I mean, if
April 1st.
Well,
we're to get all of the sections done.
Yeah, a rough draft in early March, a final
Early March.
A final draft in early April.
Okay.
So
could I make a suggestion? And it fits in, I think, with Jennifer's, but it's maybe in the remaining time, skim through the things that are on the list and just identify, understand what they are. Because I was in some cases, and I think this may have the same thing. So if we clarify that, and then maybe the thing to do is for people on their own over the next week, say, go through, and if they think it's an issue they care about, write a sentence, 2 sentences, and in the existing materials John pulled together to see if it's already addressed. And maybe it is or isn't, or we can do that later, but just write the sentences they think make the point they want to make, and then we come back and go through them. I don't know if that advances things or complicates it. Everybody drafting on Zoom is awkward. I haven't had experience with Google Docs myself, but others love them. So we certainly have a list of issues. I don't have opinions on all of them, believe it or not. But at least, write the sentences you think make sense, and then we nail it down.
So I'm inclined to vote against the motion, and I'll say why. So when I worked in local government management, I frequently was involved in writing contracts. And when we wrote contracts, we would, or settlements, we would discuss with the parties involved before we started writing anything. We would make a list of deal points. You don't start writing the text until you have some deal points. And I don't know that we have the deal points to start writing yet. That's my concern. Because I might think the deal points are A, B, and C, and Gary may think they're E, F, and G, and Jennifer may think they're J, K, L. And if we each start writing, we're not writing toward the same settlement or the same contract. So what this matrix, and it seems probably over elaborate. What I'm trying to do is help us identify deal points, the neuralgic points that we want to identify before we start writing the text. That's my concern.
John, this is David. Could you explain a bit about what you mean deal points
So-
in this context?
So I'm talking about when I was assistant county manager involved in this stuff. We would always write up deal points. I think we had a fancier term, but basically, you know, you don't start writing the contract or the settlement until you know what issues you're going to address and how you're going to address them in a general way, and then you can come up with the nuanced words to deal with it. So for example, I mean, we'd have to go to our list of issues here, but so let me get to the list of issues.
I have them up on the screen, John.
Okay.
Why not do this, John? Points might work fine. Why not start with facilities and then use this outline to pull out the deal points? So you can figure out what section goes with facilities. And we'd have that done. And then we could go off and write it.
Yeah, but
I think you can get there if we start off writing. I mean, I think we've talked through so many of these issues, and we have got an organization. At least there's some different pieces of how we're going to do this, but we understand where we're attacking this. We have the existing comprehensive plan to work from as well. So I think if we are looking at that and thinking about the principles that we already have, the organization structure we're going to, you know, go into here, we could make some progress by getting off the ground. I'm concerned if we don't, you know, do that pretty soon, we're going to have problems making the deadlines. So that's my comment, John. Sorry.
Okay.
So
No, it's fine.
if you just look at it right here, sidewalks, trail system, bikeways, roads, those are all facilities. They're all 2 point something. So we could just all bring those up into the outline and make it work.
Yeah, but those are just headings. They are not calling out the issues with sidewalks. They are not calling out the specific issues.
Right, but that's what your format is. That's what your issues topic would be for. So if you had the facilities listed, then you could go into your next columns and list the issues or what needs to be fixed.
Right. So
that was my word. So replace the word questions with facilities. I guess that's 2.0, and then start with facility roads. I think it was roads.
yeah, my concern is that I mean, I am at least as concerned as anyone else on this video session that we get done on time. But I'm concerned that if we rush into it without adequate preparation, we will actually be caught up in a series of redos. So
Can I make a suggestion? And I'm lost as to how the best way to proceed is. But what if we just start going down 2.1, 2.2, and just walk through about 3 or 4 of them?
That's what I was suggesting.
See what people say. I mean, destinations around Reston. Are we simply saying town center, village centers, TSA areas, metro, and then the corridor beyond the TSAs? Those are all destinations. The schools are destinations. What kind of list are we trying to compile there? Does anyone have an opinion?
Hey, John, this is Mike Garcia.
yes,
Can I have a moment? So when staff has gone through this list a little bit, and we've kind of compiled them into group 1, group 2, group 3 kind of discussions, because we were kind of unsure kind of where this wanted to go. And we thought by grouping them that way, we could target the ones that maybe had less need for kind of maybe staff to kind of help explain why something ended up in the plan the way it did. but also because we understand that the group may need a little bit more time to digest certain topics. So by doing that, we thought might be better to kind of digest it all. Plus, some of these are, and we were unsure kind of what the topic was that was kind of a question, and so that's why we kind of annotated it a little bit that way. Hoping to try to at least give the group something to at least, some structure to work through this document so that as you all are able to kind of finish this and finish your discussions, kind of how you are going to be. Because I think my concern right here is that you all just want to kind of start going into writing the document, but I don't know that you all, one, know the particular topics of each one or kind of where each person stands and whether you actually have consensus or don't have consensus. So if you have many people writing, say, on climate change, somebody thinks there's an issue, somebody doesn't, and somebody's in the middle of, yes, there's maybe both, then you kind of get all these kind of viewpoints, whereas you want to talk about it for a little bit, kind of, hit a timer on it or something like that, or everybody submits some sort of comment, you can kind of look through it real quick. I guess my point was that maybe look through what staff has provided and see if that might be of assistance in helping formulate a discussion as you all move forward.
What staff product are you referring to, Mike?
John King, did you email John Mooney the document?
Hey, good evening. Yeah, John, that Word document I sent you at the end of last week had some notes on it. I know you said you might not have time to look at it, the holiday and the weekend and everything, so.
Okay, so I apologize, John. I ended up not looking at it. Did I? Yeah. So my drop ball there. I can certainly do that and send it to the whole team. When did you send it to me, John King?
Oh, Friday afternoon. I think it was probably about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. So really towards the end of the week. So totally understand. Not having time to look at it's one working day basically. So.
Okay. Okay. I can certainly share that. So. So we've had. Yeah, we're nearing 9 o'clock.
Yeah. So not hearing any other discussion, I guess I would call a question.
Okay. So the motion is that we begin writing the section on facilities. Is that correct?
Yes, using our outline and John Carter's, and if I didn't know a staff version existed, but I'm happy to throw that in if whoever second me wants to add that. But using those as also reference material, but to really start writing, and that was my motion.
I think I was the second, so I would concur with what Jennifer just recommended.
Okay. So let's do it this way. Those not in favor, please call out your name.
This is Bill Penman. I'm going to abstain because I'm not sure quite what the concept is. Are we writing in the next 15 minutes and at the next meeting, or are we each going home and writing our own? I'm just not sure how it works. I'm in favor of writing sooner rather than later, but I'm not sure how it works.
Yeah.
How about this as a suggestion? How about this as
Last time you talked about having certain people write it. You had assigned a couple of people to write and see what they'd written, and then we discuss it. So are those two people going to, those people that you nominated, are they going to write it?
My motion did not include who writes it or how it's written. It was how to tackle the next topic. We can decide those later.
be voting against the motion because though I want to get writing, I think if we don't do some preliminary analysis and discussion among us, we may have to do many rewrites. So I'll be voting against it.
Why don't we try this, John, just to move this thing forward? Take the text that we have, the 2 chapters and any other tidbits that we find, and somebody can just move those over, move the facilities part of that over into a chapter. So you're not writing it, you're taking what's already written and putting it together, and then put that in front of the group for next time. And then you can fill out the things that you're looking to fill out, John, the issues that may or may not have been covered in the facilities chapter. I also want to say another thing, and this is in response to Mark and the notion of the plan as a guide. I think 180 pages for a plan is too long. It doesn't mean less detail. It means more targeted, so that we ought to try for something less than 180 pages. If we combine the transportation chapters, they're each about 7 or 8 pages. You can probably pull those down to maybe 8 or 10, and we've removed repetition that's worth 10 pages. So I think we should try to be concise and detailed enough, but I think we tend to write a lot, and it's not very meaningful, and it takes a lot to read the thing to understand what it's even. So I think we should try this method and also try to keep pages down. I don't want us making more than 180 pages. That's no one's ever going to read 180 pages.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Could I just pick up on what John said? And that if we take either somebody cuts and pastes and mails out for us to read sections dealing with the facilities that are there, and then we each individually go through these lists and just say, that's already dealt with, it needs to be tweaked, or that needs to be tweaked, oh, they forgot this, and make a note. Then we can come back to this list and a template that already exists. And I think, just looking down here under roads, for example, 3 major road crossings. Well, actually, the existing plan has 4 major road crossings across the toll road, one of which is a tunnel option. The issue of roundabouts is not discussed there. If that's important, we could have a sentence that says roundabouts should be considered where viable means of moving traffic. Through traffic versus, that's a big policy question. But a lot of this stuff is either there or could be added with a sentence. And so we may be able to take and sort of blend John's approach and Jennifer's approach and what you're interested in, John, but I don't know, that's a thought.
So let me so what I hear John Penniman saying is that taking Jennifer and Gary's motion to begin writing the section on facilities, and one version of that would be John Carter's version, is cutting and pasting all of the facility sections.
Yes.
And putting them together in one place.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bill Penniman's elaboration on that is, once we've done that, then we can go through our list of issues and see what is missing.
Or
I think that's
missing, or we want to change.
Yeah, that's why I motioned the way that I did. So I want to get us through. I heard 1 abstain and 1 objection. So did the motion pass?
Well, wait a second. So do you agree with the way John Carter has phrased it?
Yeah, that's the next step, is once we decide we're going to start writing, it's how do we write? And John Carter gave us the key to that, and Bill gave us the homework.
Right. I agree with that too. I think what, John Carter and Bill said is going to really get to where you're going, John. I think you have a valid concern. It's just we're going to be able to get there and ferret those out and move forward better if we do it the way you just suggested. Yeah, by Bill and John Carter.
So the writing exercise would be gathering together all of the issues or all of the sections on facilities in the current plan and putting them in one place. That would be is that correct?
Yes.
As it pertains to transportation.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, I can support that as a first step. So
Then we'll go over it at the next meeting.
we'll go over that the next meeting. I think we need to go over the issues because it is my firm belief that many of us on this working group do not understand what stands behind the list of issues. Many of the issues. It's so telegraphic, many of us don't understand what they are. So anyway, but as a first step, I support people who would do that exercise of gathering together the various sections on facilities into one document. So I withdraw I would support the motion. Bill Penniman, are you in support of it?
Yeah, I think that approach is a way of moving forward, and everybody will then have a context for addressing the list of specifics if we understand it.
Okay.
And John, I think getting to your other point is that, you know, if we have something in front of us, we do better to getting to those conversation points that we may disagree with.
Yes.
It's going to help get to your concern, John. I don't know if Bill wants to add to that or.
I just want to make sure that you're not expecting all of us to rewrite it, because that would take forever to go through everybody's version. That
Yeah,
there are a couple people to compile and.
Totally agree, Jan, that we don't want to do that. So is there anyone who is against the proposal, which is basically a cutting and pasting of all the facilities issues? Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Jennifer, are you willing to chair that subcommittee? Subcommittee?
You want me to, did you say Jennifer, right?
Right.
I didn't think it was a committee. I think someone needs to just go through the actual document and cut and paste so that we have a working document that we can bring up on screen next time. And Bill, you know, made a good point. If we have a working facilities document, then it's all of our homework to go back and see what changes we would suggest making and using these outlines as examples and bringing up next meeting. So I don't see it as a subcommittee, but if I'm happy to do it, I'm happy to cut and paste all the facility sections. I actually wouldn't be surprised if John Carter's already done it.
John, would you like to collaborate on this?
Okay.
Okay.
Could I make one request, and that is that it be distributed in advance so that we can look at it and not just on the screen, which I find hellacious to read. But thank you, John and Jennifer.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
And I would ask people to at least look with indulgence on my matrix and start trying to figure out if you have something on the list of issues, how you would articulate that issue a little more clearly using some of the questions implied in that matrix. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We are at the end of our wits and at the end of our time. So
Next meeting, John, when is it?
the next meeting is February 2nd.
So if John Carter and I agree to get everybody all the facility section in one document, what, a week before that?
That would be a very generous timetable on your part.
Does that sound good to everyone?
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay. I would ask that so let's see. I think we're down to number 9. Is there any additional business? Could we have a motion to?
I so move.
Second.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Lynn. Okay. Is there any foolish enough to disagree? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Gwen.
And Jennifer.
Bye now.
Good, John.
Thank you all.
Thanks.